Hello, this is Nick Wykowski, other known as Q2. I'd like to show you guys how to program an air-native extension with Flash Builder in Eclipse. Now this type of setup is very useful if you don't want to install Visual Studio, yet you still want to create a native extension for the Windows environment. A very similar setup can be used for the Macintosh environment or pretty much any other desktop environment that Air supports. The advantage of this type of setup versus the one that Adobe recommends is you don't have to install Microsoft Visual Studio, which itself can be a huge memory hog and puts a whole bunch of stuff into your system they may not necessarily want to have just for one simple project. I'm going to be using the CDT plugin for Eclipse to create a DLL file that the Air Native extension essentially will use. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Air Native extensions, it'd probably behoove you to take a look at Adobe's documentation of what Air Native extensions are and what they can provide you. The project I'm going to be setting up for this first part is going to be a very simple Air Native extension that runs on the Windows environment. This first video is primarily going to be setting up your environment, and then subsequent videos are going to show you how to actually do the programming of that DLL file, and then finally integrating that DLL file into your actual Flash, or sorry, I should say Air application. So let's begin. So here is a copy of Flash Builder. Now in this particular environment here I'm using a newer version of Flash Builder, but the same type of steps can be used in order to set up this same type of environment. You won't see anything special here. So pretty much the first thing you're going to have to do is install the CDT plugin into Eclipse. Now this particular version of Flash Builder is using what's known as Eclipse Indigo. Now every version of Eclipse has its own version of like its own code name. You'll need to find out which version of Flash Builder that you're using, which corresponds to which version of Eclipse that you're using. My example here, like I said, I'm using Indigo. First thing you want to do is search for the CDT plugin for Eclipse. So just a quick Google search or Yahoo search for Eclipse CDT should render eclipse.org/CDT. And you'll want to go and find the Eclipse distribution download site. So like I said, in my particular version I'm using Eclipse Indigo, and here is the software repository version or download. There are versions of Flash Builder that are using Helios or Galileo. Again, this type of setup can work for any of these. It doesn't necessarily matter. If you have just the standard Eclipse install, you can use the same type of setup as well. Make sure you copy and paste the version of the of Eclipse that you're using. Make sure you get the software repository here. I'm just doing Control-C, and that's all I need for this setup right now. I'm going to close my Internet Explorer, go to the Help menu within Eclipse, and go to Install New Software. I'm going to then paste this new this URL, and I can either hit Add or I can just hit Enter. And what you'll see in just a moment is the CDT repository that includes all the features available in CDT. In our case, all we need is the CDT main features, and we really don't need anything else. There are other optional features available. I've had kind of hit or miss in getting those working and things like that. For our examples here, we're just going to use the main features. Then hit Next, and then go through the installation setup wizard here pretty much for those CDT plugins. I already have them installed, so I'm going to hit Cancel here. You would hit Next and then go to Finish after you accept the license agreement. After you install your version of CDT, the next thing you're going to need is your compiler. Now CDT itself is just the IDE, and it does not actually include a compiler itself. You can use one of a huge variety of C++ compilers. The one I've had the best luck with so far is one called MinGW. Now if you have Visual Studio actually installed on your computer, you can actually use the Visual Studio compiler, and pretty much all the examples that Adobe gives you will work right out the box. However, if you want a G++ or a GNU version of C++'s compiler, which by the way is open source and free, you're going to want to search for a project called MinGW. So again, going to your favorite search engine, MinGW, and you want to go to their website. Now, the MinGW, you're going to want to download MinGW. You go to the Downloads section under Navigation, and of course it should come up with their SourceForge project. The simplest way to get everything, instead of just downloading and doing your own compile and things like that, they've got the Download tab right here. And then of course download the MinGW file or installer. I'm going to hit Run here. And of course run this on my computer. Now again, I've already installed this on my computer, but I'm going to go through the setup instructions here so you can pretty much get the idea of what you have to do. I'm going to hit Next. Of course, I want to always download the latest repository catalogs. I do want to accept the license agreement. And then I'm going to choose a location to install MinGW in. This particular version I've got installed in my temp directory, but you can really install it anywhere you want on your computer. But you will need to know where you do install it, because we'll need that in a later step. I'm going to hit Next. We're not going to create a Start Menu folder. And then in my case here, I'm going to need the C compiler and the C++ compiler, and then also the basic system. In our case here, we don't need the developer toolkit. However, that is something that you can definitely install if you wish to. I choose the C++ compiler because there is a chance that I may be doing some C++ applications to create these DLLs. I'm not going to be showing how to do that in this particular case, but that's definitely an option. If you ever want to do a Fortran or an Objective-C DLL, you can do those as well. Now, the nice thing about the way that this is all set up, all these languages here can create DLL files. It doesn't matter what language is going in, the DLL file is going to be coming out exactly the same pretty much. So we're going to hit Next, and then if I were to hit Install here, it'd actually go and download and install each one of those components into my computer here. Now, because again I already have this installed, I'm going to just hit Cancel, but in your case you would hit Install. The installation process takes about 2 or 3 minutes if you have a high-speed connection. I've seen it take as long as 5-6 minutes to grab all the components and then actually install them. So when you're finished, what you'll end up having is a MinGW folder, and in particular what you really need to make sure you have is its bin directory, and what you're really going to be using is the G++ program and GCC. Again, GCC is for is the GNU C compiler, and then G++ is the GNU C++ compiler. Now these are essentially the exact same compilers that you would find under Linux, under Mac OS and things like that. So what's really nice about using this methodology versus targeting the Visual Studio environment is your project's going to become a lot more portable when you go between operating systems. So after you've actually installed MinGW, you need to add this add the compiler to your into your Windows environment. Now, kind of the key of the entire C++ compiler, having it on your computer, or the C compiler on your computer, is you need to really be able to run that from anywhere on your computer. So for example, if I load up command prompt and I type in GCC, I should be able to actually compile a file from pretty much anywhere. If that's not the case, which it probably won't be if you just installed this, you need to set up a Windows environment variable to include it into your path. You do this by going to Start menu, go to Computer, Properties, and by the way, these instructions are for Windows 7. Windows XP, they're very similar, except when you get to this step here, you will need to go to the tab that says you will need to just go to the Advanced Properties. So go down to environment variables, and then on the bottom under system variables, you're going to want to find the system variable that says path. So click on path and hit edit. You'll notice I already have this on here, but you'll want to have the path to that bin directory that I showed you earlier. Again, I installed MinGW into the C temp MinGW folder, and then you just want to add /bin to the end of that. So this line right here is actually what I ended up adding. Semicolon C:/ temp MinGW bin. Then hit OK to save those changes, and then hit OK and cancel out of all the rest of the dialog boxes. Once you've done that properly, you should be able to go open up a new command prompt, and if you type in GCC, you should get this message that says GCC fatal error, no input files. Or if you want to test things more, GCC/help should give you a help dialog box of what GCC actually does. So once you have all this, you're pretty much ready to go. You're going to want to go into Flash Builder, go to File, and Restart after you've added that environment variable. If you do not do this, the C++ or Eclipse will not pick up on your C++ compiler, and you'll get all sorts of weird error messages later on down the road. So make sure you restart Flash Builder, and then once you've done that, you should be pretty much ready to start your programming. Okay, so now we're back in Flash Builder, and let's continue on. So first thing we're going to do is change our perspective to the C++ perspective that the CDT plugin now gave us. Go to Windows, go to Window I should say, open perspective, go to Other. You should see C++ in the drop-down or in the list. Click OK, and this should open up the C++ perspective. You may notice that C++ will now be in the upper right corner here as well, so you can quickly switch between C++ perspective and your Flash perspective. So the first thing you want to do in order to create your actual A&E is to create a new project. So we're going to right click in the Project Explorer area. You can also go to File, New. Go to New, and we're going to create a C project. We're of course want to give it a name, so we'll say Sample A&E. And we're going to choose a shared library, but as an empty project. Now, if you've set up your environment variables properly and everything else seems to be okay, you're going to notice that under toolchains, you'll now see MinGW GCC. If you do not see this in the list, or it says no toolchains available, that means that there's something not set up right where Eclipse is not seeing MinGW in your path. If you uncheck this, you can see all the different types that are available, and that includes the Linux GCC, Mac OS, OS X GCC, and other things like that. So I'm going to hit Next here, and it's going to allow us to do two different types of configurations, one for debug and one for release. Now, in all honesty, one of the drawbacks of using MinGW within this type of environment is debugging is not very easy. In fact, I haven't found a way to debug your DLL files as they're running yet. Keep that in mind as you go through this environment. Of course, Visual Studio has a very, very rich debugging environment for debugging your DLL files as they get launched by air. But for right now, I'm still going to keep both of these models here in case we do figure out a way to actually have a debug version. So hit Finish. This is going to set up a new empty project, which you should see on the left-hand side. I need to add that to my working set here. Sample A&E. Okay. And of course, all you have here is it has just the basic includes. Has nothing else. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to copy in our header file for Flash, or I should say the Flash player. So the Flash player itself, in the Air SDK, now mind you, if you just have the Air SDK separately, it's also in there as well. It's going to have a header file. So we're going to go and copy that in. So I'm actually going to right click into the Sample A&E folder. I'm going to go to Import from the file system. I'm going to browse, and I'm going to go find where this header file is. In my particular case, it's within my Flash player or my Flash Builder instance, which is under the program files x86 because it's a 32-bit application under Adobe. I'm going to have Flash Builder. I'm going to go under SDKs, the SDK version that I'm using. Make sure you're using a 4.5 or higher. And then there should be an include directory. Should hit OK here, and then you should see Flash Runtime Extensions.h. Again, that directory is in your SDKs folder and within your Flash Builder install. So your SDK version number and then includes. And once you have that, check the box, and hit finish, and that should import your header file right in here. The next thing we need to do is include the static library into the DLL. We do this by right-clicking on our project. We go to Properties, and then here we want to go in and find the C++ build environments. So we go to the C++ build, and we go to Settings, and then under our linker, we want to go into Miscellaneous, and under Other Objects, we need to find the actual object file we need to link into this DLL. Essentially what linking does, it will give all the hooks that Flash Player needs in order to talk to our DLL. It adds that into this project. Essentially it's the private version, or think of it as almost like adding in a SWIC. The .h file is kind of like the how you interact with the project, or how you interact with the SWIC file, and then you have the actual SWIC file itself. So we're going to hit the plus sign, we're going to hit, and then from the plus sign, it's going to say add file path. We're going to add it from the file system. And we're going to go and add this pretty much from the same folder. We're going to go to the C drive, program files x32 or x86, under Adobe, under Flash Builder, under SDKs, our version number, and then this is where things go a little bit different. From there we're going to go to the lib directory, and then there's going to be a win directory, and then from here you should see Flash Runtime Extensions.lib, and hit OK. So it's going to add this Flash Runtime Extensions.lib file into our compiler so that our DLL file will be able to do everything it needs to do. It also gives us the ability to use the FRE objects, FRE new, FRE get, FRE set, and all that other stuff that essentially comes in with into play when you program your own ANEs. So once we have this, we can hit apply. Now you'll notice on the top here that the configuration is set for active, or is set for debug. We'll also want to add this same extension, or the same object, under the active, or I should say under the release as well. So click under release and add that exact same file. If you click on the add and then you go to file system, it should be the last things that you selected, so you should be able to hit OK on there, hit OK again, hit apply, and you should be all set. So now our environment is pretty much set up to go. There is one little gotcha that we're going to have to deal with, and the header files that Adobe actually includes with the ANE, or with Air I should say, has a little issue where, because everything is pretty much set up to be under Visual Studio, they make a couple assumptions. In particular, you've got this if-def Win32. They assume that anything on the Win32 platform is going to be compiled under Visual Studio. That's not the case for us, so we're actually going to have to make a little bit of an adjustment to this header file. We're going to remove the if-def Win32 block here, all the way down to the else, hit the backspace. We're going to delete the ndif to make the file syntactically correct, and then we're going to go save that. After you've made that change, you may notice a few error messages or a few errors that may still exist. That will actually clear up as soon as we do a full compile. So we'll go and close that. And the next step we're going to do is we're going to create a new project header. So right-click, New Header File, and we're going to choose the name of our header file. So in this case here, I'm going to do sample ane.h. and this is going to be a default C header template. So hit finish, and the project will automatically add your name and the date that you've created the file. And from here we can actually start creating our own header file. Another thing that we're going to want to do is create a C project or a C file that will complement our header file. So we're going to do this right away as well. So we're going to go right click on the project, new, source file, and we're going to say sample ane.c, and again we're going to choose the default C source template as well. Hit finish, and then this is going to set up our basic template. From here we're pretty much ready to go to start programming our actual ANE. So in the next recording I'm actually going to show you how to set up your ANE and do the basic programming steps to get that to work. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next release, in the next video.